You have found yourself on another edition of Locked On Bulls. On today's episode, we got breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. Kind of breaking. I mean, it's a little later in the day when y'all hearing this, but it's my reaction to it. Breaking news that Lonzo Ball has been cleared for 5-on-5 next month. What will that mean for the start of the season? We'll talk about all that and more in today's episode of Locked On Bulls. Let's go.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily Chicago Bulls podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. So, appreciate you guys for tuning in and rocking with us. As always, like I said, hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. Lonzo Ball is the big news of the day. Big shock. But actually, something in a manner that even as somebody who's kind of sick of all the Lonzo news, I can't sit here and tell you that I'm not kind of excited to see where this part goes. As Lonzo Ball has confirmed, as the Chicago Bulls did, that he has been cleared for 5-on-5 basketball starting next month. He said on his podcast earlier that the goal is still to start playing by this first game. And to hear that Lonzo Ball is cleared for 5-on-5 is actually a step in the right direction. That feels like a real step. And I think that's where a lot of this season has become very resigned for Bulls fans, or a lot of what's coming has become very resigned as far as like, yeah, Lonzo's coming back. We've heard all that before, right? This has kind of turned into the boy who cried wolf, right? But hearing that, he's getting cleared for 5-on-5, that he's still doing a lot of work in the one-on-ones, and that, there's an excitement around him coming back and actually being able to be cleared to go out there and play an NBA somewhat tempoed basketball game is a step in the right direction, and something that I think is, listen, I could sit here and just be like, I don't care, I'm sick of this, but like, this is something where if this is his dream, if this is what he continues to want to go after, the fact that he has gotten himself to the point where he can play 5-on-5 basketball again is commendable, and I commend Lonzo Ball for that. I think what makes this interesting, though, is what is the realistic role for Lonzo Ball on this team coming back? And of course, that's going to deal with, what kind of player he's able to come back as. But the one question that I have around Lonzo is, what is he still capable of defensively? Because if Lonzo can come back and still be kind of that player defensively that he once was, I think that there's still something to be said about him being a useful player off the bench for you this season. Now, I caveat it with this season because I don't think there's any reason to bring Lonzo Ball back for more than this season. But as far as this season goes, I think that there's some good that could be had in bringing Lonzo off of the bench. I think there's also some benefit, me personally, to Josh Giddey playing with a player like Lonzo, because Lonzo did exactly what a lot of Bulls fans want Giddey to do. Hey, young fella, your shot is bad. It does not go in the rim. Here are the things that I did to improve my shot. Because remember, Lonzo Ball came in, I believe he was a 30% three-point shooter from the three-point line his first season in LA. Like, he was not good. That shot was horrible. There was nothing you could count on there. And then by the time he got his time in with the Bulls, he was a above 40% three-point shooter. And listen, as far as success stories go, that's one of the most major successes you can have in this league, being able to change the player that you were, very Kirk Heinrich-like in that way, right? Change the player that they kind of had boxed you in as, and you were able to go out there and become all of a sudden this player who, I mean, listen, was some phenomenal defensively, could knock down the three ball, could push the tempo. I don't know if Lonzo Ball is going to turn Josh Giddey into a whirlwind defender. I think that's going to be a very difficult situation. Like I've said before on this show, Josh Giddey's going to have to improve a lot just to be bad at defense. But I do think that there are some things to be said about Lonzo Ball being kind of a mentor for this team, kind of being the eyes that aren't always on the floor. And then as far as play goes, I mean, that's a major question for me, because I just don't know, right? You can't build around him for sure. Where does he come off of the bench with a lot of the pieces you have? I mean, we had this conversation last episode that me and Hayes were on. you've got a lot of pieces on this team that kind of require playing time, right? Or do they, if you want to go back with the old regime? We'll talk about that kind of at the end here when we talk about can the Bulls afford to waste time. But like, there's going to be something to be said about Lonzo Ball coming off of the bench behind Josh Giddey. Is that the best situation for you to be in? I just don't know. I just don't know. I have to see him practice. We have to see what he's going to be on the floor as a player. But to me, when I look at where Lonzo is at physically, the fact that he's taking steps forward, but also the fact that, like, how long can you trust that? How much of a role can you give a guy that you expect to be injured? As far as bench players go, right, there is that. But who are you taking those minutes away from that could be developing in that time? That's why this is such a very, very nuanced conversation around Lonzo to me. I love the fact that he's been cleared for 5-on-5. I love the fact that he's able to go out there and he's able to play his all. I think that this is a good spot for him to be in now, right? He's got no expectation on him. The expectations are as low as possible. If he has a healthy season, it'd be great. I wouldn't personally bring him back unless he's wanting to take a minimum money deal, but maybe somebody out there is looking to go out there and pay a guy, take a chance on a guy. To me, though, like, this is an opportunity for Lonzo to kind of go into that, and very much like what we've seen at the NBA level, even when guys are younger, they kind of have to go into that mentor role that, hey, this is how I did this. This is what I was able to do. This is what I looked for on the floor. I think that those are things that Lonzo Ball would be really, really good at. I know he's not ready to be there. I know he still thinks that he's going to be able to come out on the floor and still be this dominant point guard that he was. And maybe he is. Maybe the facilitating doesn't take a dip. Maybe the three-point shot doesn't take a dip. Maybe he's able to come back 110% defensively. But it's just not what we've seen out of Lonzo Ball. And that's the part that makes this tough. It's not like this is a new situation that the Bulls are going through and have been going through for the last couple of years. This is kind of who Lonzo is. And his time in the NBA, he hasn't played a game, by the way, since 2021. In his time in the league, 52 games, 47 games, 63 games with the Pelicans, which is the most he played. I was in 2019, 2020, 55 games in 2020, 2021. Now, I do believe either the 55 or the 63. I always forget how the COVID season worked. I think it's the 55. The 55 games was basically him playing most of the schedule that was available to him because of COVID. And then he comes over to the Bulls and he played 35 games. And he hasn't played a single tick of basketball since 2021. That's a problem. You can't trust that. You can't take chances with that. And that, to me, is why you see Lonzo Ball, like the updates and all that stuff, why we're on the show and we're like, it's great to hear that Lonzo's coming back. It's great to hear that he's heading toward 5-on-5. But what are we really expecting him to come back and be? That's always my question. I'm excited to see what he's going to be able to do in 5-on-5. Let's hope that we see something great out of him. Hey, I do want to know how you guys feel, man. Let me know in the comments below. I'll be down there talking with you as well. Do you like the fact that Lonzo, or are you excited that Lonzo Ball has been cleared, I should say? Or are you kind of like where we were at, where it's like, this is cool, but like, all right, we'll see where this goes. Let me know in the comments below. I'll be down there talking with you guys as well. Before we get into the next topic where we talk about Zach LaVine and the Chicago Bulls possibly being a match made in hell, we got to tell you guys all about Game Time. Listen, Game Time right now is your number one app whenever you want to go out and get tickets. When you're talking about going to Sox games or Cubs games, Game Time gives you the best last minute deals. I mean, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute deals for things like sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all that and more. And with their flash deals, you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game and the events. They've got also the all-in pricing, which is my favorite feature, because don't you hate every single time you're like about to buy tickets, then you get to the end and it's like, actually, it's like $600 more. You're like, what the heck is that? How'd that come about? And then you look at it, they were including a breathing fee, a eating fee, a sleeping fee. All of that is included when you hit the all-in pricing. Toggle this feature on and show the total up front. No surprise fees when you get to your checkout. All you got to do to take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Locked On Bulls. Appreciate you guys for tuning in and showing love here on the YouTube side right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, man. Leave the 5-star review if you're over on the podcast side. We appreciate everybody who shows love to this channel. I mean, how the Locked On Bulls channel and the Locked On Bulls community has grown over the past couple of months. I mean, especially in the offseason, has been absolutely phenomenal. Not only did we cross 10,000 subscribers, but we're already over 10.3, trying to get that up to 10.5. So if you haven't done so, that like button ASAP. Only 200 subs away, man. Appreciate you guys, man. Let's talk about the Zach LaVine Chicago Bulls situation that they are in now. This is being reported by Mark Stein. He wrote this on Friday, so yesterday, saying league sources say that the Bulls are thus resigned to the fact that they will likely be forced to start the new season with LaVine on the roster and take it a step further by trying to help him rebuild some trade value after months of fruitless efforts to find a new home via trade. And after a foot injury and eventual surgery limited the 29-year-old to a 25-game season last season. And remember, he ends up going through the season-ending right foot injury in February. I mean, listen, last season was not a great Zach LaVine season, but the fact that the Chicago Bulls basically have to kind of go out there and help Zach LaVine rebuild how good he is, that scares me. That is a report that terrifies me, because what that report says to me is, we got to get Zach the ball. We have to make sure that Zach LaVine is involved. We have to make sure that Zach LaVine is a focal point on this offense. And to me, if that's the path you're looking to take, you're setting your team back further. You're doing things that are going to hinder some of the development that you may have seen. I understand that there's some people who just look at Zach LaVine and say, well, this happened and that's why, they ended up losing this much, or, the teammates that he had weren't good enough, which I do agree with, right? Or, yeah, I mean, like there's so many things to me that you could sit there and defend Zach LaVine on. But the one thing that I can't defend is what we saw last season. It wasn't a bad teammate situation. It wasn't a bad coaching situation. Do I think Billy Donovan has his flaws? Yes. Do I think Billy Donovan is a Jim Boylan? Absolutely not. It's asinine to think that, right? And I understand there's some people that think that way, but all of a sudden Billy Donovan shows up here and he's the worst coach in the NBA. I don't buy it. I think that there are some schematic issues that may come up. I think there's some things that I don't feel confidently about, but I also think that Zach LaVine plays a part in that as well. And the fact that we have to talk about him possibly coming back into this season and having to get his trade value rebuilt, that's scary. And rebuilt to what point? Because listen, if you want to rebuild his trade value as a role player, right? Just a player that somebody thinks is valuable, because that's where this comes from. Remember, nobody sees Zach LaVine in this league as valuable with the injuries and with the pricing that he currently has on that contract. That's the dilemma you face. Nobody views him as a valuable asset to your team right now. I'm sure there are teams that think he can play, because he can. I'm sure there are teams that think, wow, it would be great to have a shooter on this team. But at the end of the day, you called a good chunk of the league and the league said no. You called teams that ended up waiving players and the league said no. That's a concerning spot if you're trying to rebuild or rebrand him back as this, like, he can be a number one on your team. Look at him. He's out there scoring 25 a game. Because to me, that puts you in one of the worst situations of all. Now, there could be a situation where the Bulls say, we're going to let Zach take all the shots because we want to lose and keep our pick. But that doesn't sound like how AK has run things. That doesn't sound like AK's plan. AK wants to go out there and compete. He wants the Bulls to compete. He doesn't want to see this team go out there and try and win 25 games. I talked about this on Locked On NBA last night, basically that, or a couple nights ago, I should say that, FanDuel has the Bulls pegged for 27 wins. I think that the Bulls hit the over on that. If you had money right now, or if I was a gambling man, I'd run to FanDuel and put some money on that they went over 27.5 wins, because I just think that this team isn't smart enough to say we're just going to give it up and try and hold on to our pick. Or I don't think that that's a part of AK's plan. I'm not going to say smart enough because I'm not a big fan of tanking either. But I just don't believe that AK is going to look out at this team and say, this team can only win 27 games. That's our expectation right now. I don't believe it. So I don't think that you have Zach LaVine take all the shots. I don't think that you have Zach LaVine be the focal point of your offense anymore. I think those days are past. Now, could you rebrand Zach LaVine as kind of the numbers we saw last season? A number 2 option on probably a mediocre mid-level team. Could I see Zach LaVine be a 19-point on 45% shooting from the field, 5.5 rebound, 3.5 assist player? Yeah, I can. Could I see him being a number 2? Yes, I can. And I think that would be something that a rebrand would actually help the Chicago Bulls with, because that would allow you to kind of win some games. Maybe in that time you're able to rekindle some of the flame that you originally had here with Zach LaVine on this team. Maybe playing with Josh Giddey adds to that. Maybe playing with a Kobe White, who has kind of figured his game out, adds to that, right? Maybe I think those are the things that you look at and say, okay, like, if we rebrand him as this, I think then you're in a situation where you have one of 2 options. He plays well, he fits in well, he likes kind of where the direction of the team is going, and you keep him around. And you've always got that guy who can go out there and score 50, but he's just not the guy. He's not the main guy. Or you rebrand him as this number 2 player. Teams look at him as a good second option. They get desperate halfway through the season, and you're able to move him. But I think that the part that people aren't paying attention to is that's a lot of desperate. That's a lot of desperate if I'm doing that for a second or for a number 2 on my team. Heck, for some of these teams, a number 3. Because if Zach LaVine picks up his 2026, 2027 option, which he's going to do, the Bulls would currently owe him $138 million over the next 3 years if he picks up the option. Teams don't want that for their number 3 guy right now, who also has injury issues and who also, has that number attached to him. He has inconsistencies on the court. Defensively, he has a ton of inconsistencies. He has inconsistencies on just being on the court. Now, if you look at it from the other perspective, he's a young man that at one point averaged 25 points per game. He was 47% shooting the basketball in total. He was 38% from 3 for most of that time from his time here with the Bulls. He's one of the best scorers in the NBA when he's healthy, and he can take over a game at any point. But will you see a team take a risk on what he once was with the new CBA? I think that that's tough. I don't know if we end up seeing that. And it brings me to this question. Can the Chicago Bulls afford to waste time on this? We'll talk about that right after this. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. If you haven't done so, hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave that 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. So before we went into that random break there, we do have to tell you guys, I want to talk to you guys, I should say, about the situation that the Bulls have kind of put themselves in now. We hear that Lonzo Ball is about to come back and is cleared to come back for 5-on-5. We're hearing that Zach LaVine and the Bulls are kind of resigned to their fate and that they're going to have to be this, divorced couple that just kind of walks around the same house because nobody wants to move out and pay rent. What do you do with these guys? Can you afford to waste time on this? Like, honestly. You've got a developing Kobe White. You bring in Josh Giddey, who still needs some work, but is a really solid all-star level player. You've got Patrick Williams, who I guess you're still trying to develop. I don't really know what the plan is there, but you just brought in Modest Bucilis, who seems like he's going to be a solid player that you need to find minutes for. You've got Ayo Dosunmu coming off of the bench. You still got Nikola Vucevic in the mix of things, right? You've got Julian Phillips, who has shown some really good flashes. I would think that you want to focus in on getting him some time on the court and developing. Can you waste time trying to fix things of the past? Can you waste time focusing on Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball and hoping and praying that you get a glimpse of the player that you once were? Well, I know some of you out there are going to say, well, Pat, come on. You got to wait. It's not wasting time. You're trying to rebuild the Zach LaVine trade value. You're trying to get his value back up. You're trying to, I understand it, but in all that time that you're doing that, somebody else is not out there getting the full focus of what they need to get. Because you're trying to turn Zach LaVine back into the player that he once was so that you can move him for the highest price that you can move him. Again, $138 million, you're going to need a heck of a lot of value here. You're trying to put Lonzo Ball back out there in a situation that now, to me, is fully Ayo Dosunmu's of being the Alex Caruso of this team. How are you going to throw him back out there? Can you afford to waste the time that it is going to take for you to focus on building up brands to be able to move these guys? Because I think Lonzo Ball's a possible trade candidate. I think Zach LaVine's a possible trade candidate. I think that Nikola Vucevic is definitely a trade candidate, but probably nearing closer to the trade deadline. Like, at what point are you going to just say this isn't worth the fight anymore? And I get it. Financially, having Zach LaVine on your team is a burden. But let's not act like we haven't seen burdens on the bench. Let's not act like we haven't seen burdens not get the same level of playing time that they once did. Let's not act like we haven't seen the guys that just don't fit. Teams just go, you know what? Until we figure out what to do with you, you sit over there. And I'm not saying that's where we are with Zach LaVine right now. But usually teams make those decisions because they see something in the youth that they have on their team and they say, that is the future. We need to develop that. Well, I don't know how to tell you this right now. But you may have a piece on your team in Kobe White that you can say that is the future. And you saw how he was affected when Zach LaVine came back on the court last year. Now, this is Zach LaVine with DeMar, with Kobe being the point, right? Like a very different situation. So maybe in this sense, in this situation, it works out a little bit easier for you. But I've got a ton of questions. For me, I'm excited that Lonzo Ball is back on 5-on-5. It changes nothing for me in my guard rotation right now. I'm not forcing Lonzo Ball back into this lineup to try and make some trade value appear so that we can move on from him at some point. That's where my questions come in. That's where my concerns come in. Are you so focused on we got to move Zach, we got to move Zach, we got to move Zach that you miss out on the opportunity to build these guys up? Because here's the thing. Every season you don't do it is a season wasted. Every season that you wait, and if you have any hope in Patrick Williams, for the love of God, find a way to utilize Zach LaVine differently. Because you just re-signed this young man for a 5-year deal. Are you going to do anything to try and build his game up? And by that, I mean the team that is Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Patrick Williams, Matas Bucilis, Nikola Vucevic. Guess who's got to shoot the ball? There's no options. P. Will, put that thing up. What are you doing? On the team that has the starting lineup of Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, Nikola Vucevic, guess who's your fourth option, fifth option on that team yet again? It's the same guy that's been the fourth or fifth option when you've had that many guys who I guess look to take shots. Now, Giddey probably is not looking to take shots, but I would still say, give me Kobe, give me Zach, give me Vooch before you give me P. Will. If you have any hope of developing this young man, you have to start now. Stop wasting seasons waiting on stuff that's never going to turn into the diamond you thought it was. It's coal. And pressure did not change that. I don't think that the Bulls can afford to waste time. I think that this season has to be a season that you go out there and you make your statement known on this is where we're going with this. And I think if you don't do it, you may be in some trouble past this season, even if you don't move LaVine, because guess what? You may still not get his value up high enough to trade him. But we'll see, man. I want to know how you guys feel. Let me know in the comments below. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page, leave a 5-star review. Y'all know what to do. We'll be back with another episode coming you guys' way. I think tomorrow me and Hayes are going to do an extra one this week. So stay tapped in with us on that. And of course, we'll be back Monday as well. But for it's just me. Appreciate you guys for tuning in, showing love. Hit that like button, subscribe to the page. Follow me on everything at Pat the Designer. You can follow the show on everything at Locked On Bulls. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Can the Chicago Bulls afford to waste another year trying to rebuild the images of some of these guys? Y'all stay safe out there, Chicago. See Red Nation. Stand up. Peace.